Welcome to the TCJ podcast, where we discuss curious, thought-provoking, and sometimes controversial ideas through the lens of biblical wisdom. I'm your host, Keith Wood. My guest today is Tyler Lowe. Tyler, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting. I think I've been here for like a month now at the college, so this is very fitting to.
Yeah, well, I'm
into
very
this.
excited to have you here. Just to give the audience a little perspective on who you are. So you are our new director of development for the college.
Yes, sir.
But you've got an interesting background. You've been a busy man. So you have, in terms of education, you've got a Master of Arts in Antiquities from Johnson University, a Master of Letters in Ancient Cultures with a focus on archaeology from the University of Glasgow in Scotland. And you also are a member of the United States Army Reserves, where you work as a monuments officer. So you've worked alongside both national and international partners to protect cultural property in conflict environments.
Yep.
And then you also have done work in the private sector doing restorations of churches and other things related to that kind of work. So today we're going to be talking about culture. We're going to be talking about the value of culture. You know, what is it good for? And you've obviously spent a lot of time in your life thinking about culture, working to protect culture.
Yeah.
So I think that you're a great person to have this conversation with. But to start off with, you know, culture is one of those words that I think can get thrown around a lot, and we all kind of apprehend to some degree what it means, what we're talking about. But as a specialist, what do you think of when you hear the word culture?
Identity. Who do you say that you are, and who do you want to communicate to other people who you are as well? And whether that's individual, whether that's as a society, culture is it's in my idea, in my mind. I think culture is the culmination of individuals, of households, and of institutions, and the product of all those things together produce what we would call the culture.
Mm-hmm.
There's good culture, there's bad culture, there's culture in the workplace, there's culture in museums, there's culture in arts and heritage. There, and it's a very ambiguous term. And I think if you have 100 people in a room and you ask 100 people what's culture, you're going to get 100 answers.
Okay.
So very, very ambiguous. There's mine.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good. So maybe there isn't a single right way, but it is kind of that idea. You know it when you see it. There are things that are definitely related to culture that we can all talk about.
I just would boil it down to identity.
Okay, identity, sure. Well, I guess one of the things that I would ask about there is, you know, when I think about identity, that's something that I'm typically conscious of. Like, sure. I know who I am. Would you say that that's true of culture, that people kind of are aware of the cultures that they're a part of?
That's actually a great question. I would say, subconsciously and consciously, when you start talking about identity, and this isn't like identity politics. You know, let's separate identity politics and that political discussion. I think that culture and or do you know if you're actively consuming or if you're contributing to culture? I think that's directly tied to we'll call it virtue. Virtuous society. Mm-hmm. Virtue being like the disposition or the choice to do the right thing. And I would say that it takes somebody whose basic needs are met, and they're, we call it self-actualization. In self-actualization, you have a much bigger interest in the culture that you are developing and consuming. If your basic life and family needs are not met, I mean, why are you focused on the betterment of society if your own household, which is the smallest society, is not being met? Mm-hmm. So I would say for those who are who are thriving, you tend to see a care and a passion more for building a positive, good, healthy culture than what you would see in somebody who's not particularly thriving. I think that there's less of a care, but they're still contributing. That is still a part of the culture. It's just there's your subconscious contribution. You are contributing to culture no matter what. The question is just, is it conscious or is it subconscious? Is it intentional or is it unintentional?
And if it's going to be intentional, that's generally going to be in people whose basic needs have been met, right? If those aren't met, they're not going to be a person sitting around thinking like, how can I kind of help mold the culture?
Why are you
right?
going to think about art in history when you're like, hey, how do I get food on the table?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so as I just said, you spent a lot of time learning about culture and protecting a variety of cultures around the world. So obviously, you think that culture has major significance.
Yeah.
Do you think that culture is inherently valuable, though?
I do, and not just from like the secular perspective on, oh, I like artwork and I like to go to museums and I like architecture. Like those things are great, that's fine. But from a Christian worldview, we have general and special revelation, right? God communicates to humanity through special revelation in Scripture. He communicates to us through, hey, this is my identity, this is my culture. Christianity is a culture, right? This is the culture that represents me. And I would say that, I would say that is significant for Christendom, but especially for, I went down a rabbit trail. Can we
Yeah,
go back to
sure,
that question?
sure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I was asking about whether you viewed culture as inherently valuable. Um, you mentioned earlier, maybe to tie this into something you said earlier, you
Sure.
mentioned that there are good cultures and bad cultures
Yeah.
earlier. Now, if we're thinking of culture as something that's important, that ought to be protected, that seems to be a little bit in tension with the idea that culture has inherent value, or maybe not. So I guess I'm kind of inviting you to comment on that tension.
Yeah, I mean, you'll know the value of a culture based on its product, right? What is the community producing? Is it producing a society based on vice? Is it producing a society based on theft and destruction, on consumption of illicit illicit trade, illicit things? I would say that that is probably not a very great culture.
Yeah.
If it is producing a bad product and is producing harm to themselves and to others, then I'm just going to say, hey, that's not a great culture. But is it great? Is a culture, is it lifting individuals up? Is it lifting households up? Is it is it allowing institutions to be able to provide for basic needs and to protect our individual rights and freedoms from, from a government? If that's what an institution exists for, is to help foster virtuous traits within households and within individuals, then institutions kind of serve as that buffer between the government and between individual societies. And that's culture, and that's where it's valuable. So yeah, I would, like we said, culture, quote unquote, is a very ambiguous term, and it can mean so much to so many people. To me, I think that the value of a culture is determined by the product that it produces. Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it negative? So yeah, that's where.
So culture, if I'm understanding, if we're thinking of culture in terms of identity, a person's culture is a big piece of the way that they kind of see their place in the world and see themselves as interacting with the world.
Yeah.
And what you're saying, it sounds like, is there are ways that you can show a person that they fit in the world in such a way that bad stuff results from that, right?
Yeah.
Like if you tell someone this is your role in the world, this is your place in the world, and what you say to them is garbage,
yeah,
then you're going to get bad results.
You get bad results.
Yeah. Okay. I think this is a related question to that. So you've worked in conflict environments where cultural sites are deliberately targeted.
Yeah.
Why do you think that culture so often becomes a target in war? Like, what does that reveal about culture's power?
Because identity has meaning. That's why I relate identity and culture as synonyms. Identity has meaning. Culture is what influences a people on what they love, on what they abhor, on what they're willing to die for, on what they're willing to live for, right? How you view your society or yourself is ultimately, it's your worldview, right? So I would say let's take Islam, for instance, radical Islam, and let's take the Buddha statues in Afghanistan from a couple decades ago. You have the Taliban that come through and they just decimate and destroy these ancient Buddha statues because it does not align with the story they are telling about the culture they want to replace in Afghanistan. If it doesn't align with our values, if it doesn't align with what we want the world to see us in, it must be destroyed. And that's the radical take. We see it time and time again throughout history, whether it's Alexander the Great who comes in and he was a culturist. Alexander the Great was like, yeah, I'm going to not only take over your lands and your economy, but I'm also going to take over your culture, and you are going to assimilate to mine. You can still practice, you can still worship and do your stuff, but you're going to assimilate to us. In 20th century, of course, we can't escape Nazism, and Adolf Hitler wanted to destroy cultures, destroy a people's story. You destroy their story, you destroy their identity, history forgets about them, and now you don't have to worry about that pesky little worldview that you abhor coming back up again. From a Christian worldview, this goes to that general and special revelation. I think that we find God through culture, and if we're made in the image of God and that is our identity, then that naturally translates to finding God naturally through general revelation. I can't tell you how many times I've been to beautiful, beautiful churches in the world and been like, man, I can't believe a man crafted this. I can't believe that a woman painted this. This is incredible. Surely, there is a power that leads us into this. Same thing, walking through beautiful national parks, you can say the same thing. Look at this gorgeous, amazing creation. Surely there is a creator for it too. And again, national parks, that's a culture. It might be a natural environment, but it is the culture of American citizens who've stood up and who've said, we want to preserve the natural beauty of our landscape, of our environment. And we're going to section this place off that it will not be molested by man. It's not going to be touched by development. We're not going to build houses here. We're not going to put oil wells here. That is a reflection of our culture saying that we value the natural world. And the Christian will take that a step further and say, because God created it, and we honor, love, and respect what God created. We see that in art. We see that in natural world. And I think that all that points to God as a creator. And what better way to honor that than to preserve the culture that is good and honoring.
And there's like a little bit of a reciprocal relationship there, right? These institutions, like a national park, for example, they're there because they're a reflection of our values as a nation, but they're also there and perpetuating those values in a sense, right? Because they're saying like, there's beauty here and now you can come see it, and the next generation can experience this and
inheritance,
cultivate those same values. So I think that's a really kind of cool takeaway to see the role of culture and kind of passing down values. In your experience and in your studies, what do you see happening to individuals and communities when cultural continuity is disrupted or destroyed? So you kind of talked about from the perspective of Hitler or Alexander the Great. They saw something going on and they said, we want to get rid of these cultures. But as a person experiencing that disruption, what happens kind of from the inside?
Dysphoria. That's a biblical term, right? Your dysphoria. You have one power in charge, and it is preventing a culture from taking root. And what do? You scatter, and now that worldview goes across the world, right? A worldview around the world. I think that culture, worldview, identity is a vacuum, and if you try to eliminate it, whether you're successful or not. If it's dysphoria and it goes around the world, or if it is completely destroyed, it's a vacuum. It's going to be replaced. But what's it going to be replaced by?
Do you think that can a culture survive once its physical symbols and spaces are destroyed?
that's a great question. That's a great question, and I can answer and argue from both sides, yes and no. On let's take the yes, it can survive, and we'll turn to the sciences. We'll turn to archaeology and anthropology. That through anthropological studies we can identify a dead culture, and we can learn from it through excavation, through research, and we can try to get glimpses of it. So yeah, in that sense, we can learn about Mesoamerican culture from ruins that have been long forgotten in Copan or Gracias a Dios in Honduras. We can learn about that culture, even though we don't have the textual culture like we have in manuscripts. But they still have the material culture, or the ruins, and maybe we're lucky enough to find remains where we can figure out what was their diet, what was their medicine. I think some of the earliest records that we have of culture or society are broken bones that have been repaired. It shows intentionality. It shows care for other people. Because what would happen before that? You break your leg, you're no good to society. You're gone. You're dead. You're for the wolves. But what does a good culture do? Oh, you broke your leg? I care for you. I value you. Let's get you healed up. We'll care for you during this time. And we see that in an archaeological record on a point of like, oh, this is when they started caring for one another. This is when culture and society mattered.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. There's the yes, right? There's the yes.
Yeah.
But then on the no side, how many societies or histories do we not even know about? We don't know what we know. Or excuse me. We don't know what we don't know.
Yep.
We don't know what we don't know. How many societies, people groups, cultures are lost to history because it was destroyed? I have no idea.
Yeah, sure. I guess one question would be, because we were kind of focusing on physical symbols and spaces. Suppose there's a group of people that kind of have a culture built around, be it a church or whatever, and the artifacts and things, and those things are taken away from them. And so now basically you're left with people. How hard is it for them to keep a culture alive without those physical?
Very effective, extremely effective. The first century church was based off of that, right? One of the first manuscripts that we see pop up in New Testament tradition. We're talking like into the first century, beginning of the second century for the earliest manuscripts. Manuscripts are a reflection of culture. It's us identifying, writing down a story that is passed down through oral tradition. Oral tradition is actually, it's pretty accurate, because when people care about what they're talking about, they're going to preserve it. We see that in Native American lore and tradition. Take the mythos away, and you have accounts of histories and records through Native American lore. Through fractured and a multitude of tribes across North America who have similar shared stories through oral tradition. I think that this is kind of a statement of textual criticism. But I mean, let's look at like Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, right? We look at Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, and we don't have a doubt that is recorded, like a recorded literature, that it's an accurate literature. Maybe not the story, but that it came from Homer.
Right. Yeah.
What I think it was like 400 or 500 years after, and don't quote me on the exact time frame. Maybe it was 300, but 400 or 500 years.
Time.
I think it was a long time from the point where Homer actually wrote Iliad and the Odyssey, and we start seeing manuscripts actually start popping up saying, hey, Homer wrote this. It's like 400, 500 years later. But that oral tradition kept the story alive. So I would say eliminate the textual or the material part of culture, and we still have oral identity. We are still orally communicating our story. I mean, we're kind of doing that right now through a podcast, right? This is audio file, but what we are doing is recording, our oral tradition, our oral history.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it goes to show the resilience of culture that really you can, whether it's oral just through people kind of remembering these things together, or whether it's archaeological finds that show that these people cared for the sick, and
Yeah.
like yeah, the culture's not that easy to get rid of, I guess.
It's not. No, it's not. And I think who wants to get rid of culture is oppressive systems. Oppressive systems, tyranny wants to get rid of culture, because what is culture but a collection of ideas, right? Identity, ideas. All these are synonyms. All these are complementary of one another. But we have oppressive regimes that want to get rid of ideas and say, no, you have to think this way. Don't think another way. It's the opposite of a collegiate or a college or university environment. Why do colleges exist? To take ideas and share them openly with open dialogue and forum. We communicate ideas and we teach through that. That is culture, and that is a culture of pursuing knowledge and pursuing wisdom. And what an incredible opportunity we have here at Trinity to be able to share and communicate our ideas. I think that's a wonderful environment to continue to foster.
Yeah. Revisiting some of the physical spaces, physical symbols. Obviously in the Christian tradition, these things played a huge role. I grew up in Germany. There are cathedrals all over the place, and
Yeah, you
they're
did.
massive. And we have some big church buildings in America, but we don't typically think of the building as being kind of a centerpiece to our worship experience or anything like that. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that modern people kind of underestimate how much physical space shapes their beliefs and their behaviors?
Yes, absolutely. I think American Christendom, and I say American because, as you said, you're talking about in Germany. In Germany, you have monasteries. I remember sourcing stained glass once from a monastery that was still producing in Germany. They're still producing stained glass in a monastery from like the 17th, 18th century. They've continued to produce. And again, this comes down to identity and culture. They're a people who, for generations, have received an inheritance of trade and practice. And that's true for craftsmen in Germany, in France, in England. There are plaster companies in England that have been around for 5 or 6, 7, 8 generations.
Wow.
Their grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-great-great-great-grandfather were ornamentation specialists doing beautiful plaster work on the interior of homes and government buildings and churches. So there is like an inheritance of that we don't really have terribly too much of here in America. But what we do have is something that is equally as important, but just different. And that is a Mod Podge, a big old stew,
An amalgamation.
yes, that's right, of people. We have people who've been here since the Mayflower. We've had people who've been here since their parents moved here. And that brings so many different ideas and trades and abilities that other places don't have. So I don't want to say that that's better or worse. But to your point, the sacred spaces and places, I think there is something valuable about a sacred place that honors God through sacred aesthetic.
What do you think that does for a person who has maybe regular experiences at a place like that?
That's a challenge, because I think we have to constantly, die to ourselves and renew our minds every day, as Paul tells us, because it's very easy to worship the place and not the Christ.
Yeah.
It's very easy to sit and think, wow, this is so beautiful, this is so gorgeous, look at what man made. And I'm guilty of that. I just said a little bit ago that that's one of my favorite things about, historic architecture, is that I get to look at what man created, ... for Christ, for celebration of the innate abilities that God has given us to produce something good
And even if
lasting.
they didn't, you can still recognize that that's where that ability originates from, right?
The general revelation, even
yeah.
through the secular humanist that says, I am going to create an architectural wonder for man, by man, in man. We can still look at that and say, wow, God had given them a wonderful, incredible gift. I hope
Look
they
at his
use that for the
mercy and
kingdom.
grace in this
Yes.
person's life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's something to light, right? Light. And, you know, when God created the heavens and the earth and he created light, that is a tool, that is a general revelation that shows us the how do I say this? I love stained glass. Love stained glass.
Yeah.
Because it could be a dreary, rainy day outside, but you step inside of a church that is just surrounded by stained glass panes, and it is just a rainbow of color on the inside. Because light is coming through and prisms are spraying across the interior of the church, and it is just beautiful. It is gorgeous. I can sit and bask in the presence of God in that and say, wow, God created light, and look at how we're able to honor that.
Yeah.
That's cool. And it sounds cheesy, you know, it sounds like, oh, but for me, that is something that draws me closer to worship.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah. So like anything, I think pretty much anything can be used for the wrong purpose, right?
100%.
But there's a place, these kinds of aesthetic, I don't know, blessings, we might call them. They create opportunities. Now, whether we take advantage of those opportunities the way we could or should is another question, but they do create opportunities to reflect on God in kind of unique ways.
And to tell biblical stories.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, to carry on that analogy on stained glass. I mean, you know, most of these stained glass windows, especially the ones that surround churches, tell a biblical story, or they tell a story from that culture that has to do with a biblical theme. You go to Ireland, look at how many stained glass windows tell the story of St. Patrick, because they identify with St. Patrick and the formation of, you know, of Christianity in Ireland, and they tell that story. You don't have to know the story of St. Patrick to walk by that church, or walk by that building, and then visually see it across those panes.
Right. Yeah,
You know?
yeah, that's a good point. Okay, shifting gears slightly to more of a preservation conversation. Obviously, preservation often requires sacrifice, whether it's money or time, or in some cases maybe even risk in like conflict zones, like some of the ones that you've worked in. What do you think justifies those sacrifices, morally speaking?
What do I think justifies the sacrifice required for preservation?
Right. So, for example, I mean, we could, you know, let's say the Louvre is being bombed, and a guy runs through a building and grabs the Mona Lisa to protect it, right? Like, well, you just put your life on the line for a painting, right?
That legitimately happened. No, our counterparts in World War II did just that.
Yeah.
As Hitler was coming into Paris, the monuments men and women of World War II did just that. They safeguarded the Mona Lisa, and they took her to a quote unquote undisclosed location until it was safe for it to return. And again, this comes down to identity and tourism. And tourism. I mean, let's face it, the economics of it are, you know, it's directly tied. How many people go to Paris because they want to see the Mona Lisa?
Yeah,
right?
There's a lot.
1930s, 1940s. You know, there's a reason why Hitler took the picture in front of the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower is architectural culture. And hey, look, I have conquered Paris. I am in front of the Eiffel Tower. Look how powerful I am. Culture, there it is. You know,
Yeah.
What's the value of preservation? The ability to oh boy, here we go. What justifies the sacrifice? The ability to control the story and control the narrative, right?
Yeah, and because we've seen that that narrative is tied deeply into the formation of the values that
Yes.
those people have, right?
You control the narrative, you control the product. You influence the narrative, you influence the product. I like to throw this out there and, you know, take it maybe for a grain of salt. I don't know. What are museums? In the classical sense, they are houses of propaganda, right? You know, what is propaganda? Propaganda is this, like, I'm going to influence information that you are receiving and consuming so that we can have a, you know, we can have an outcome that we want, you know, having quote unquote control, right? And in a classical sense of the term, it's just influence. We want to influence a culture in museums. And how do you do that? By telling the story. Here's an object. Now let me tell you about this object. Here's the people that it came from. Here's what they believed. Here's why they were successful. Here's why they failed. This is how the culture was destroyed. What can we take positively from this? What can we take negatively from this? And how do we apply it to ourselves? Like there's the end goal for a museum institution, right? And some people are going to take that and they'll take that information for good and be like, awesome, how can I tell the story of Christ to bring people to Christ, right? That's what we do in missions, isn't it? In missions, we want to be able to tell the story of Christ so that others may come as well. But then you can also take it negatively, and you can take it in the, you know, in what I would call a bad context, a bad intentions. Oh, I can influence people and control people and what they believe based on what I put in a museum. And what do you mean that they're not gonna fact check what I put on this on this doc in this paper? I've seen some outlandish, crazy claims in museums around the world. I don't want to dox anybody here. You know, I don't want to say it out loud. You know, give specific names. But I remember going to a museum where they had a painting on masonite, painting on a 19th, 20th century medium. But it was marked, painted by St. Luke in AD 37.
Wow, okay.
Because this culture, this museum was like, we are so in tune with apostolic succession. We are so in tune with the story of God that we have what Luke painted in AD 37. It was Jesus and Mary on very obviously a you know, a more recent production.
Yeah. Wow.
So, you know, that's, even though it's related to you know, a Christian story, I would say that that's a bad intention. It is intentionally misleading. So yeah, that's what I would.
Well, let's talk about our responsibility toward cultural preservation. Do you think that there's a meaningful sense in which culture gives us obligations to the past or even to future generations? How do you think about cultural stewardship, ethically speaking?
I think stewardship is a conservative principle. I mean, you know, what is conservative? The root word is conserve. You know, we are to conserve, to preserve. We don't create things to be destroyed and replaced. I think it is a Christian virtue, a Christian conservative value to build for permanence. We want to build for lasting, for longevity. You know, in construction, art, and architecture, there's a reason why I love preservation. It's because this structure was made 300 years ago. Now I can be a part of keeping it for another 300 years. That's incredible. Even if my name is never on those records or any of those books for the church or the government building or the house, whatever, my name can be lost to time. But I will die a happy person knowing that all of these buildings and structures are still being utilized and will be utilized for generations to come. I can pass something on that's very meaningful and that's existentially fulfilling. I love that idea, you know. In contrast, you have, I'm going to build a very cheap structure that's going to be torn down in 20 years because the materials probably aren't going to last that much longer. You know, we talk about you know, green construction, go green. The best way to go green is through preservation, restoration, and if you have to build new construction, do it with the idea of permanence. Do it with the idea that you're building something lasting that is going to exist for a long time. Preservation, restoration, maintenance, upkeep costs are significantly less long-term and the midterm than
Constantly doing new construction.
than constantly doing new construction. 100%.
So talk to me about, I mean, this idea of building for permanence as a Christian virtue. Where do you see that stemming from? What's kind of the root of that as a virtue?
That's a great question too. As a virtue, where do we see it from? You know, I would say it's the product of the culture that I grew up in. I grew up surrounded by historic old buildings. I grew up with a fascination for it. I always knew, even at a young age, that I wanted to be in history in some way. And later on, you know, that turned into humanities, arts and humanities and history. It's all intertwined. It's all tied together. But where does the value come? Where does it come from? Truthfully, I think that it is a part of that still small voice of the Holy Spirit. I think it's the Holy Spirit saying, build, do well, glorify, honor, and enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly see it as related to other things. One would be a work ethic, right? Like, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God, right? So I definitely think that there's a correlation between building things that are going to last and doing a good job.
Yeah.
But I can already see a correlation, is what I'm saying. I wonder what other sorts of Christian principles we could tie that idea of permanence into. That's definitely something worth thinking about.
Yeah.
What do you think that the average American most misunderstands about culture, and what would you most want them to recover?
That it's cheap. I would say that it's cheap.
Culture is cheap?
Yeah. I haven't thought about that other than, you know, right now. This isn't something that I've really dwelled on or thought about too much. I'm just kind of thinking off the cuff here. But I think in our consumerist mindset that we have in Western culture, we like to consume. If something breaks, replace it. You don't have to replace it; you can fix it. You know, and I think that's very true for culture. If you are what you consume, if culture is what it consumes, that can be fixed. And how do you fix it? By putting virtuous things in front of it to be consumed. If you eat garbage all day long, your body will reflect what you eat in your in your energy. It will reflect your ability to think. They say that your stomach is your second mind, right? Your second brain. That's a direct correlation to society and culture as well. We are what we consume. Are we listening to edifying music? Are we watching edifying things? And at this point, I'm not even just talking about spiritually edifying. I'm not just talking about glorifying, because fact is, as Christians, we live in a culture with non-Christians, right? But what they consume, what non-Christians will consume, oftentimes is also what Christians consume. And this isn't a call for me to be like, hey, watch purity films, and
right,
I'm not saying don't listen to radio. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that it does directly correlate and tie to this idea of culture. What is it that we're consuming? Because that is what we're going to be, what we are producing.
Yeah.
And
it's a cumulative process.
It's a cumulative process. And I would say, to tie that back into cheapness, this isn't the dollar store. You don't go to the dollar store and buy some Christmas decor to put up for a day for a party, throw it away, and buy it again next year. That's the cheap mindset, consumerist culture that we often have. I would say culture is not cheap. It is permanent in one way or another. What we build is going to be here and is going to influence not just our lives now, but our children's lives and our children's children's lives. So I think it's extremely important that what we're doing is building an intentional, virtuous culture. And again, virtue being defined as that inner disposition to always choose the right thing. We're always, every day, every decision that we make, there's a right choice and there's a wrong choice. And virtue, being defined as like always intentionally choosing the right choice, the good choice. And as Christians, we don't have to ask, well, what is good? We know what good is. Mm-hmm. Because we have an incredible special revelation from God that says, this is what is good. I'm not telling you that this is good because I'm being a stickler and I don't want you to have fun. I'm telling you this is good because if you do the opposite, you are going to be miserable.
Yeah.
Everything that God tells us not to do isn't because, don't have fun, don't enjoy your life.
Right.
That will destroy you.
Yeah.
Adultery will destroy you. Gluttony will destroy you. Hurting other people doesn't just destroy you and your own morality. It destroys your culture.
Yeah.
We have a wonderful, incredible textbook, a guide that says, here's how to build a wonderful culture.
Yeah.
Love your neighbor. Love the Lord your God. Build a virtuous society that chooses to do good.
Yeah, I think that that's all so well said. I think it paints a clear picture of the significance of culture, and I think that it is strongly suggestive of what our obligations are as Christians with respect to preserving culture, with respect to helping to form virtuous generations. So with that, I'll say thank you, Tyler, for speaking with me. I've really enjoyed it. I hope that those listening, I'm sure that they've enjoyed it as well. So I hope that's the case, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.